Hey everyone, welcome to another segment of Tea and Chocolate Productions. I am so excited today because I have two lovely women. They are two of the 5 altogether authors of 50 Amazing Swiss Women. I brought this to the forefront earlier on in my prior episodes on Tea and Chocolate, just highlighting some of the two actually of the highlighted women here. And the authors, two authors of this book are Laurie Theurer and Anita Lehmann. Oh, and so I'm coming from Canada, and Laurie is currently in Switzerland, and Anita is in the UK, in Cambridge, correct?
That's right, yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Yes. How do you both feel about this book that you've contributed to?
Shall I start? I feel amazingly proud. And this book was a journey of epic proportions, basically.
Yeah.
I had started out having the idea to write this book on my own. It was inspired by my previous book, in which it was a book about Swiss history, and there was a chapter on amazing Swiss women. But in that chapter, I was limited to about 2,000 words, and I thought, well, there's probably too many amazing Swiss women. I can't fit it all into 2,000 words. And so I approached the publisher with the idea for a book purely about Swiss women, and he was very open to the idea. And I started writing, and during the process, I found that the 50-year anniversary of Swiss women's right to vote was only months away. Right. And I was looking at the potential of writing between 50 and 80 stories of different Swiss women from the past and present. And I thought, well, there's no way I could possibly accomplish this. And talked to the publisher again, and he said, let's put together a team. So I did exactly that. And within days had Anita and 3 other authors on the team and ready to start writing. And we were able to write the book in approximately 3 months together.
Yeah, yes. That's incredible.
Including the translation into two other languages. So
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Anita, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, also very proud and very, I feel quite emotional about it actually, because I'm Swiss by origin, and I grew up near Bern in a little village. And I just wish there had been a book like this around when I was growing up, because I very sorely lacked role models of a female nature when I was growing up. And it was it would have been very, very nice for me to read about Swiss women who have accomplished great things. So for me, it's quite an emotional journey to research and write about these women, and just to find out about them, because before September 2020, I didn't know a single name on that list, maybe apart from Ruth Dreyfus. I didn't know a single one. I wouldn't have recognized the name. I wouldn't have known who they are. And I'm just so pleased that these names are out in the world, and that, we're putting them back into history, basically. Yeah, and into people's minds and into people's consciousness. Yeah.
That's a common problem, actually, in Switzerland. Before I started writing, I did a Twitter poll, and I asked people, when you think of Swiss women, who do you think of? And 99%, the answer was Heidi.
No, right.
And I wanted to write back and tell these people, she didn't exist, right?
I asked my mom.
There has to be some Swiss women in people's minds besides Heidi. Yeah. And that was a huge motivator.
I asked my mom, who incidentally is called Heidi, and she's amazing, but I asked her about, women she finds amazing from Switzerland, and she was like, I can't think of anyone. She just couldn't think of anyone at all. So, yeah.
Well, I think, it is an emotional journey to take. You're talking about someone's life. And I think you're both mothers as well. Mm-hmm. And I think, as mothers, I didn't think I was going to bring this up, but anyway, I'm going to do it. That you, you know, being a mother, you can mother all kinds of ways, and you've birthed and you know, you've had your own children. And when you're, I think there's much more, I guess, attachment or understanding to the preciousness of someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're bringing them from the past to the present, you've done so beautiful here. It was so fantastic to read the stories here. Tell me about just some of the, I know that you've all divided the women amongst you and who was writing about who. Tell me some of the women that stood out to you and why, and just share us like a brief, you know, a synopsis of what they had accomplished.
It's a really good question. I think the women that really stood out to me were, I mean, the current women. I mean, they are doing amazing things, and there's so many more I wanted to write about, but really the historical women, the women from the past who had no rights, who had,
Yes.
you know, were essentially property of their husbands and had to ask them for permission to be able to study or permission to be able to work. And these women who basically had no rights whatsoever found a way to do what they were passionate about and succeed at what they were passionate about in so many different ways. And as someone who's been studying and researching a lot of history over the past couple of years, I think those are the ones who stood out most to me.
Yes, for me, it's also the women who haven't necessarily accomplished great things, but I'm just thinking of Hélène Rey, who I didn't write about. Katie wrote about her, but you know, she just wanted to be a midwife, and she just basically, you know, she was accused of being a witch. She was. They tried to, you know, stop her from working in that profession, and they tried to get her out of the village, and she just stayed, and she stayed in the village, and she stood her ground, and she, you know, she just stood her ground and did what she needed to do, and kept going, doing the work she needed to do. And, you know, it isn't a high-flying life. She didn't write 700 books, or, you know, she wasn't famous, but it's hugely admirable what she did nonetheless. Yeah.
Oh, I remember that story. It was very impactful nonetheless. I mean, you know, I think that our definition of what we think success is, you know, is, you know, can be challenged, right? And to me, I thought she was very powerful. I mean, she just stood her ground.
Yes.
Well, they all did. As I was saying beforehand to you both, is I just, you know, if you compare yourself to the ladies back then, and I'm thinking, gosh, you know, sometimes it's difficult to use our voices today. I can't imagine, you know, Laurie, the things that you had just articulated about, you know, being owned by, you know, something, you know, like being a property or what have you of a husband or a father. But what also stood out to me about that is those who spoke about, well, that highlighted the fathers or husbands that supported them on their journey. There's something to be said about that during those times also. What did you think of them? Of the men that that supported these women on their journey?
Right. Sorry, I've been always going first. Would you like to go ahead, Anita?
Yes, absolutely fine.
You're the polite thing.
You know, it's brilliant to write.
Yeah.
But they would also have. I'm thinking of one of your women here, Laurie. You'll have more authority on that one, on the doctor, the first practicing doctor.
Trying
to remember.
That was Marie-Hein Beutlin.
That's right. Yes.
That's right. Yeah, that was also Katie's. We should have brought in Katie.
It was yours. She had to, you know, get permission from her father, basically, to study, practice, and then to practice again, and then from her husband. And these men obviously supported her in her efforts, and that is hugely admirable. But I think it probably will have cost the husbands less to support the women than the women to actually go for it anyway and to do it. But it's very they also had to stand up against the laws of the time.
Yeah, that's a great point that you're making. Yeah. How do you think we're doing so far in terms of just women in terms of their accomplishments or whatever it is, even, you know, whatever it is that they want to do? Where are we at today? What's your opinion in terms of progress?
That's a very big question.
Well, Anita, come on, let's go, girl. I love the way you like, come on.
I mean, obviously we've come a very long way since the day of having to ask your husband permission to work.
Obviously, yeah.
Or needing to have a man to own the home, you know, not being able to be on the deed yourself as a woman. We've come a long way, but I think what it showed me is we still have a very long way to go.
And can you explain that? How so?
I mean, just the fact that we're sitting here talking about feminism and talking about, you know, women's power, it's not a given. And I think it's going to be a very long time until it is a given that men and women are equal and have equal strengths and powers. What do you think, Anita?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're just saying it's a long time since we're not in a time where men can forbid their women from working, but actually in Switzerland that was the case until 1988. Yeah. Even long after the women's vote came in, women husbands could forbid their wives from working until 1988. They had the right to do so and to ask them to stay at home. So it's not that long ago.
Wow.
See, I came here in 1996 and I had no idea about that.
And the repercussions of, I mean, this is, you know, brings us maybe back to women's right to vote. And I don't know when Canadian women got the right to vote, but I imagine it will be around 1920. Is that correct?
You know what? I didn't do my homework.
Sorry, I
looked it up last night, right? I looked it up last night. Yeah. And I thought, and it kind of escaped me. I thought, oh crap. And now that you're mentioning it, but it escaped me.
It probably is because what I found also is something I hadn't really consciously thought about until I started writing and researching for this book and sort of putting it in the context of the 50th anniversary of women's right to vote. For women getting the vote so late in Switzerland, 1971, it's had huge repercussions and a huge impact on women's rights all over, generally in Switzerland in particular. But so I think progress in Switzerland is particularly slow compared to other European countries where the vote came in sooner. So 1988, I can't imagine many European countries still having legislation that would forbid women from working if the husband didn't agree.
Right.
For example, maternity leave is another example. Paternity leave statutory paternity leave only just came into, it just was accepted into law last year. So we're a long way behind lots of other countries. And I think, you know, I'm not saying Britain is perfect or Canada is perfect. Indeed, I think there is a long way to go. I think women in positions of power, women in science, women in leadership roles is so important to get women in those positions in order just to get the balance, just to get the power balance right.
Yeah, and then strive towards equal pay for equal work as well.
Yes, which is something.
Yeah.
Which is incidentally something that Émilie Gour already fought for in 1912. You know.
Right.
Yes.
Well, there's been a real sort of big discussion here in North America around feminism versus anti-feminism. And the arguments are, they're very interesting to listen on both sides. I personally am not going to go work on an oil rig, right? Like that's just not going to be me. I'm not going to go and work on a construction site. There might be some women who want to do that, but typically we're not doing those things. We're biologically, typically different than men. Period. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that might get lost in these conversations, and the fact that, but yes, you know, the conversation certainly needs to be about, we can do what men do. Whoops. And we're also, we celebrate our differences because we're similar and different all at the same time. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I'm.
Go for it.
Yeah, no. It's an interesting point you're making about the oil rigs, but where I would like to see more women is in the running of the oil rigs and in the running of the companies that manage the oil rigs and in the policy making around the oil rigs. That's where I feel very passionate about seeing more women. I can see that obviously physically there is a difference. That's there is. There are jobs that men are more suited to better suited to than women, say builder. I don't know, that is very heavy manual work, but I'm not talking about jobs that necessarily require the muscle power. I'm talking about the jobs that require
brain power. Yeah, exactly. Transferable skills. So talk to me a bit about the couple of women that really stand out about you, who you personally wrote about in the book, one or two, that you just want to bring to people's awareness here now that we're talking about Swiss women. Yeah, like who they are and what they accomplished, that really touched you both.
Do you want to start, Laurie?
I love
it. No, I'm just looking at my list here, and I mean, I want to talk about like all 50 of them, but I know we don't have time. But the one that really struck me was Martha Gosteli, and she was she would have not called herself a suffragette, but she was a suffragette from a relatively early age.
Yes.
She was born in, I don't have the book in front of me, I would have to look, turn of the century. And by the time she was a young woman, she saw her father, who was a farmer, very active in politics, and her mother, as a farmer's wife, stay home, take care of the house, cook, take care of the kids. But she was also participating in politics, but on the fringe, and she wanted to be much more involved in politics on an active level, but she couldn't. And by the time Martha was 40, her father had died, and her mother, her sister, and herself were left in a house they did not own because it was his house. And they needed to enlist the help of a friend, a neighbor, a man who was willing to speak for them and allow them to own their own home because they had nobody else.
Wow.
And it was at that age that she decided, okay, that's it. This is not how things are supposed to be. I'm going to start to devote my life to women's rights. And so she made a decision at that age. I will not marry. I will not have children. I will devote my life to women's rights and getting the women the right to own their own property and to vote. And she fought the good fight for decades and saw in 1971, February 7th, 1971, the majority of men in Switzerland voting for women to have the right to vote. So she helped that goal to be reached in many ways.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, took a little bit of a break to catch her breath, and then decided, now wait a moment, we have won this battle and now it needs to be documented, because we cannot depend on the patriarchy to document the fight we just fought and the fights that are ahead of us. And so she had by that time had moved out of the family home and dedicated her family home to a museum of women's suffrage, basically, for all of Switzerland. So she collects documents and placards and all kinds of film and everything she could get her hands on to document the fight for women's right to vote.
She was born in 1917, by the way.
17.
And only died like recently, like 2017.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was remarkable.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, so a woman for me that stood out would possibly be Ella Maillard, who is a Swiss adventurer. And she also around the turn of the century. And she was part of, she was a very sickly child, and she then discovered that sports helped her feel better, and from then on she just did everything. She learned to sail like properly. She went with a female friend. They took their boat and they sailed all across the Mediterranean on their own in sort of 1920. And she founded the first land hockey team in Geneva for women, because she wanted to play hockey, and so there was no other way. So she founded the team. She became a ski champion, skied again for Switzerland, sort of. So she did everything, and then she went on a sailing trip with her very good friend. She was planning a sailing trip with her across the Atlantic. She was going to sail all the way across to Polynesia, just the two of them. And then her friend got sick and she had to abandon the trip. And Ella was rather heartbroken at that. And because Ella didn't want to get married and settle down, she didn't want to find a job and settle down. She didn't want to live in a city. She just wanted to be traveling and seeing the world, and that's what she did. So she set off towards the east and explored the mountains south of Russia, and I think it was called Turkestan, East Turkestan at the time.
Yeah, you're right.
She just explored some of the remotest parts of the world and took her camera everywhere. She made a living by writing newspaper reports and writing books about her adventures. And she traveled with caravans and across China while she sort of marched south, while Mao was marching north with his revolution. And she sort of witnessed a lot of things that were happening in that area, in all of the entire continent, really, all of Asia. She ended up traveling from Geneva to Kabul in a car with Annemarie Schwarzenbach, who is another woman in the book. It was a huge adventure. That was in 1939. They were escaping the war. They were very worried about the impending war. So they took a car and just traveled all the way to Kabul in Afghanistan. And then she ended up living through the war in India and did, a 6-year-long meditation retreat and sort of found herself. It's an extraordinary life that she led. And even when she then moved back to Switzerland, she then had a base somewhere in the mountains in Switzerland. But she kept traveling all over the world, kept writing stories, and has become she became a bit of an accidental ethnographer, because her documents are really, really valuable documents of times long gone, of shepherds in the mountains in Kyrgyzstan, and of ways of life that we have all but forgotten about now. So it's an extraordinary life. And she also only died a very few years ago, about 10 years ago.
Yeah, 1997. She was born in 1903. Yeah, it makes you wonder about those past, like what, obviously, women were in different, they didn't have a lot of power back then. And it just makes you wonder what the world was like what they were. It really has brought that to the forefront for me, but while reading this book and what is going on today. My parents came over from Italy after the Second World War. And I'm thinking, God, obviously that's completely different. But again, it's just sort of another example of where we are in the world today, like the comparisons and the differences, of course, and what they had to deal with, It's heartbreaking. And and of course these women, all of the women here are incredibly inspirational. I was saying to you off camera that, there was just absolutely no self-doubt in their psyche. They were just forward thinking. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and in Ella Maya's case, she never mentions it, but I'm pretty convinced that she was gay, and obviously that must have been a very difficult thing to be in 1920.
Which woman was that?
Ella Maya, the adventurer.
Oh, Ella. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
So,
that actually was running through my. Sorry.
I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like to
yeah.
To live a life like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually when I was reading through some of the late through the chapters. I wonder if what their what were their sexual preferences were like at the time, right? And what that might have been like for them as well.
Yeah. There's one, there's Germaine de Stael, who's total powerhouse of a woman. She was very sexually active and didn't hold back on telling.
Oh my God! So sorry, which one was that?
Germaine de Stael.
Okay, how do you know?
Because she wrote about it, and she wrote very, very passionate love letters to her lovers.
This one, yes.
And she was incredibly passionate. She was all about drama, was Germaine, and I like that about her. But I can imagine her having been a bit of a nightmare to live with. But she took on Napoleon, and she was a big part of him falling in the end. She was a very, very important piece of the puzzle of all the forces at play in Europe at the time.
Right. Laurie, did you want to add to anything so far, or with this sort of conversation right now?
I'm just enjoying listening to the story about Ella Maillard and Germaine de Stael.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted to know.
I was sitting here actually, really regretting that we only had about 450 to 500 words per woman, because
that must have been hard.
Anita did all of this research on Ella Maillard, and I learned from her the most important parts of her life. But what you've just told me, I learned several more things that I didn't realize about her, and Germaine de Stael as well. And so, yeah, it was incredibly difficult for us to get these women's lives and stories down to 450 to 500 words. That was our limitation on the page.
Yeah.
And so we really did have to boil it down to the most important and the most relatable facts. But yeah, I think, you could write novels. Basically, you could write dozens of books about each of them.
What do you think this experience has taught you?
That's a loaded question.
as humans or as writers? Or as both, obviously. As a writer, I certainly feel that I've learned a lot about being very accurate with my words and sort of condensing down large amounts of information into one digestible piece. I think I've always enjoyed doing that, but I think I've learned. Excuse me.
That's told us this would happen. I love it.
Yeah, it's just condensing a very complex story into very few words was a real challenge, and I sort of feel I'd feel a lot more confident about doing that sort of thing again now, and that was very exciting. It was very exciting to learn about and to experience and to do. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that I learned as a writer and as a woman is that the women that we researched and the women that we actually interviewed, because it is about a half split in this book, is that as remarkable as they are, none of them, that with a very rare exception, none of them actually thought of themselves as remarkable.
Right.
They were doing what was important to them. They were living their passion. They were following their path.
Right.
And doing amazing things without intending to be amazing. And that got me to thinking about, what makes each of us amazing? What is our path? And what are we giving to others while we follow that path? How are we inspiring and motivating others?
Right.
And yeah, that's given me quite some reason to think about that. And I think it was evident as our list of amazing Swiss women, which started with about 40 women that I had originally, and I watched it grow and grow and grow as I became, and then the team became more and more exposed to different women throughout history and present. And our list grew to well over 200 women without even really having to try, because everywhere we looked, there were more and more inspirational stories. So that is actually what's been going through my mind the most.
That's incredible.
Mm. Well, and it really changes the definition. What is incredible? Who is incredible? Why?
Well, that's just it. I mean, but even to Anita's point earlier about the woman, I can't recall her name. Was it Helen Ray? Was it
Yeah.
the midwife, right?
Yeah, the midwife, yeah.
Yeah, like,
Helen Ray.
so like to me, it's not so much even about what it is that they're doing, that they're solving a world problem. It's more about really following your intuition,
Mm.
you know, and following your path, your journey, your, you know, being authentic. And they didn't make any, you know, excuses for themselves.
Mm.
And I mean, and I'm particularly, I think, I guess, and not to give less importance of the present women that are also valued in this book, but the difficulty of what it would have been in the past when you know, women didn't have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to, well, first of all, say thank you to joining me today. And also, by the way, I just wanted to mention the illustrations in this book are just incredible. How did that come together with everyone's writing? Because you said you only had so much, you know, 450 words to work with, because the illustrations really took up a lot of space too. Yeah. I mean, well done to the illustrator.
Well,
Yeah,
and she's an amazing Swiss woman in her own right.
Oh yeah, I read about her.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's incredible. And if you look at each of the 50 illustrations in the book, sometimes it's really difficult to believe they've come from one person.
Right. Yeah.
And within about 2 months, she created 50 unique illustrations that display exactly who these people were. And I mean, on top of that, our author team, we were all writing in English.
Yes.
The original versions were all in English, and our illustrator is French speaking, and her English is excellent, but she is a native French speaker in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to go through 50 unique texts, digest it, come up with an idea, and come up with an illustration sometimes within hours, if not days. Yeah. And within 2 months, she had translated our women into these amazing illustrations. She's a super talent.
Yes, her name is Mireille, is it Lachausse? Or?
Mireille Lachausse, yeah.
Right. Well, congratulations, Mireille, if you're going to be listening to this video. So in celebrating these women, and you could have celebrated more, and maybe you'll have the opportunity to write another, you know, book. I'm thinking about, you know, Switzerland is such a small country, and what a beautiful offering you've done to the citizens of Switzerland. And I hope that this book gets to so many hands, both women and men, in Switzerland and beyond. It made its way to Canada. I have no idea how I found you, but I did.
I love it that you did.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I saw the cover. I thought, oh, I'm getting that book.
My dream is that, you know, in a year's time or so, that I do another Twitter poll and I ask, what Swiss women inspire you? And we'll get some answers besides Heidi, and there'll be women in this book.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. It would be really, I think it would be really lovely if they became household names, like, you know, that people use and refer to, and that teachers use and refer to when they talk to their children about, you know, about anything really, about any time, but that women are included in history. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to today's exploration of 50 amazing women, Swiss women?
Yeah, for me, I wish it could have been 5 times longer, the book itself. And, you know, I hope there is a sequel. We'll see about that. It would be fantastic to write more. So we'll see. Yeah.
I hope so too.
Can I just ask, who's been the favorite person of, who's been your favorite person to read about so far?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Or is there anyone who surprised you?
Well, I mean, I remember Regula because I did the narrative on that, right? And it's hard to say. I think I can't even, the midwife for some reason, sticks out for me too, right? Because I think I kind of, yeah, and because I know about a little bit about the history about that and how they weren't, the burning and all. And all the rest of it, and and what does it mean to be a midwife today, and it's crazy. It's just crazy making. But no, I mean, all of these stories are so valuable. I was inspired by all of them, really, for one reason or another. Yeah, it's great for me to learn about, and I've always had this sort of desire to go to Switzerland. And I think that's what probably also grabbed me from the book. I've lived in the UK too. So, yeah. So anyway, so I was just sort of drawn to, to the culture and wanting to learn more about it. So, yeah. Thanks for the question. Well, okay. Thank you for writing the book.
Thank you, Laurie, for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I wish you well in your personal endeavors. I know that you are writers and authors in your own right. You write children's books, right, Alina?
That's right. Yeah, primarily it.
Laurie, you as well. I wish you well with whatever comes next for you. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. It was lovely to cross paths. And I'm waiting for the second sequel.
Well, we better get writing.
Yeah, get on it. I'll write to the publisher.
Do that, yes. That would be great. Thank you, Lauren.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining me on Tea and Chocolate today. And I hope that you enjoyed the segment. I would encourage anybody to purchase this lovely, lovely offering. The stories in here are so inspirational, and it's a great gift idea. And I don't know, share it. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.